It's time to down tools for a bit. Welcome to the ToolShed, the influential podcast for anyone and everyone involved in the building industry. Here's your host, Mick Hawes.
Hey folks, welcome to the ToolShed podcast. As you can see, I'm in a different space. So we've moved the studio. We were on one side of the river, now we're on the other. It's a little bit sparse. We'll make it look a bit prettier as we go, but we only just set it up in the last couple of days. So the first guest that we've got in the new digs is Geraldine, and she's from Alchemy of Men, and there's men's retreats and look into anxiety and depression, all those sorts of things. And we've had many conversations on the ToolShed about suicide prevention and so forth. And it's just such an important topic to talk about, mental health, and in particular, men's mental health. Australian men are generally pretty lousy at putting their hand up and asking for help and all of that sort of stuff. And if there's a simple and clear pathway to be able to do that, I think it's a wonderful thing. So I'm really pleased to have Geraldine on the podcast. Welcome to the ToolShed, Geraldine. The first question I have for you is just a bit of background. I'd love to hear the story about how you got involved in this, because generally when I ask this question, there's some issue, some problem, some experience that somebody has had that's caused them to go into a certain direction in their life, and they end up creating some sort of tool or platform or service or help to be able to solve that problem. So where did this all come from?
Yeah, I guess it's part of my life work. So I've had my own experiences of anxiety and depression growing up, but I've been a qualified kinesiologist for the last 17 years. And during this time, I've been specializing in anxiety, depression, and trauma. But the real turning point for me was when my son was born. And it really hit me then that this world needs to change how we support boys and men emotionally. Many men are taught to man up, toughen up. Boys don't cry, men don't cry. And we all know the impact that this is happening on those in their lives. Family breakdown, high pressure jobs, especially in, I guess, the building industry is one of those places where, there's lots of stress and anxiety. So Alchemy of Men was founded in 2017. So there's a focus on creating a retreat program that I wanted to offer practical tools that men can use every day. So often men don't like to talk about their problems, but they're really good at doing really practical stuff. So I think that was one of the main focuses for creating Alchemy of Men, was actually to come up with a new program that changes the outcome. Yeah. So we dive deep. We work with the subconscious mind when we work on our retreats, and somatic processes. So all of these things are really easy to do and change how you think and feel and respond.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. We're always trying to bring you information that's going to make your life as a builder much easier. So give us a thumbs up and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Perfect. Tell us about kinesiology. And I know a little bit about it because many moons ago I became an emotional freedom technique practitioner and taught the tapping, and we talk about it in Black Belt, and one of the masters, Andy Bryce from he's a Canadian living in England, has done a couple of sessions. So our guys are quite au fait with that sort of stuff. I wouldn't imagine that many other builders, people listening to this podcast, would be, but as an example, one of our guys was he'd been training for boxing for about 5 years, just for training sake, not for boxing, and then he had a brain explosion and decided to go into his first tournament, where all first-time boxers have their first boxing tournament, and he was just nervous like crazy for weeks leading up to it, and he did a little bit of the EFT stuff leading into it, and it just took away all of the nerves and what have you. So tell us about your skill and how that is used in your retreats.
Yeah, so kinesiology works with the subconscious mind. It is I specialize in working with anxiety and depression. So I work on the level that emotional triggers, we go from naught to zero. From naught to 100 when we get angry in
Yeah.
like millisecond. So what that means is that when we're looking at working with the conscious mind, it's really only 10% of how we think and feel. So it's like short-term memory, that type of stuff. But the subconscious mind holds all of our emotional triggers and how we respond to any situation. So it's fair to say that if we're not working with the subconscious, we're not really meeting it where it's activated. So with the kinesiology, I have evolved how I work with it over the many years that I've been working with clients. But what we do is connect the emotional response to the physical body as well.
Yeah. So is it when you do the retreat, or I know you've got an 8-week program, and I'll ask this question now, so then I won't have to ask it later. Whether you do any sort of one-on-one stuff to teach people that, because it's like if we're talking about a builder, a lot of the time when they're frustrated or upset or what have you, it may be in a group setting, but they may be also by themselves, driving their car or in their office, and they start to get overwhelmed or anxious or frustrated or what have you. Do you teach in your retreats and in your programs and potentially the one-to-one any sort of technique-based approach to be able to deal with that, or do you do all the work in the retreats?
No, so that's what you've said is exactly what the retreat is about. So we're actually teaching you what to do in those moments when you get triggered. So how to calm your nervous system, how to respond differently. In the one-on-one sessions, I do one-on-one sessions, and in those processes, it's pretty much a healing experience where we're going to clear some of those emotional triggers and what is actually being triggered. So we'll look at, has there been any trauma in your life? Has there been, some family breakdown, perhaps a relationship that's not working, and where are those triggers coming from? And then helping to clear them on a subconscious level, and then learning how to respond differently. On the retreat, it's very powerful because you're in a group setting. So one of the things that came up in our last retreat in October, just a few weeks ago, is that many of the men actually felt alone in their struggles and didn't realize that there were other men of all different ages experiencing the same things as them.
Yeah. That's a very common thing. Like I hear it all of the time, not just about, emotional challenges or whatever, but being a business coach for builders, I ask, what do you like about being in this community of other builders? And the most common answer is, I'm not the only one experiencing this problem, and I kind of rephrase the question and say, so you're saying the best thing about being in this community is that we're all suffering together? And they go, yeah, which is a really bizarre thing, but it is amazing. But it's so important for people to know that they're not an island. They're not the only one suffering from this, and it's really cool when people get together and start to experience some change and open up to the possibilities, to all of these amazing tools that are out there to help us. And we think we've just got to, sort of harden up and power on and figure it out ourselves, and it's just not the case. What are the challenges that you come up against, particularly dealing with men? I mean, I can just imagine what some of them are saying, well, I don't need this shit. And, they carry on a bit like that. But how do you address that? How do you sort of break down those walls of resistance to get people to open up to what you're doing?
Yeah, look, I think when we first start talking about it, and yes, I do get that flack back saying that, why do we need this? And of course, we've been doing okay on our own. But the fact is 8 men suicide a day in Australia. So there is a really serious problem out there, and only 1/3 of men reach out for help. So what that means is there's a lot of men suffering in silence. So what I tend to tell them is it's not as confronting as you think it's going to be. This is about learning, growing, and transforming how you've been responding and how you've been thinking and changing those perceptions, rather than going in and talking about the story. I think that men think that to open up this, I guess, Pandora's box, or this can of worms of what's going on for them, that they have to sit down and talk about it and go over and over and over in the story. That's not true. That's not what we're doing here. So when we do our retreats, we bring in amazing other facilitators, including myself, but other facilitators who are specialists in their field. And we do breath work, teaching them how to breathe. When you get triggered into adrenal stress or long-term stress, you'll tend to shallow breathe all the time. Yep. So we're not actually getting enough oxygen. We do rites of passage, movement. There's a whole range of things that, are really great for calming the nervous system and being able to think clearly and respond differently.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of prevention, prevention better than the cure. And I always found that with emotional freedom technique, and found that a big chunk of people who were EFT practitioners really had no effective approach for prevention. It seemed to me like they had this wonderful tool to make this anxiety or this phobia or whatever go away. So they never bothered about prevention, and I don't believe in that at all. It's like, you keep getting bitten by the snake. We give you the anti-venom, and it's like, please stop mucking around with the snakes. Do you have any sort of approach or any ideas that you can share with us in this conversation that the people listening can start to implement to create some sort of prevention from getting into that wound up state, that anxiety, overwhelm, whatever, the emotion is, that it gets into that red zone? What solutions have you come up with over the years to prevent that before it happens?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, the first thing, we can do it right now if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
So I might need to see you though. Can I see you?
Well, if I press that button, you can see me.
Okay, cool. So what I'll get you to do is just drop your shoulders. So
I thought they were, but maybe they're not.
Yeah, that's right. So the first thing that happens when we get triggered into an emotional reaction or stress is we tend to flex our shoulders, our heart rate increases, and a whole range of other things happen physically to our body. But when we drop our shoulders, we actually interrupt that stress response. So when we get triggered into stress, it takes an hour for the body to return to normal.
Wow.
So if you're triggered at least 3 or 4 times during the day, you're in long-term adrenal stress, and it becomes a normal thing for you to feel uncomfortable. Yeah. So you might be driving to work and realize actually you're really stressed. So just dropping your shoulders, or remembering to drop your shoulders at least 4 or 5 times a day, is actually going to have a huge impact on how you feel. There's another layer to that where we start, with the thought processes. Once we drop our shoulders, we're going to introduce a different thought process. And these things can be done in, like, you could be talking to someone and dropping your shoulders. They wouldn't even know that you're doing it. Yeah. So I had, I've had clients where, they've been in call centers, or perhaps they're in a working environment, and even in the building industry, and perhaps there's, lots of pressure, lots of, attention on them, and they're getting stressed. Just dropping their shoulders can reduce anxiety instantly. Mm-hmm. So we start with that straight away.
And you mentioned also, and this is something that I learned a long time ago, and I guess I've done it that long now. It's almost how I'm normally breathing until I catch myself not doing it. But as you said, it's normally that the breathing of distress is shallow and upper chest versus sort of long and deep and in the diaphragm. And like if you watch a baby, lying down, relaxed breathing, their stomach is, big in, big out, and most people, when they're sitting at their desk or whatever, as you say, they're a bit like this, and they're breathing shallow and upper chest. So have you got any suggestions as to what can trigger that reminder? Because I know that, even you said drop your shoulders, and I went, oh, I thought they were dropped, but You've got to have that reminder. Have you got any suggestions as to how to do that, without someone following you around, poking you, say, drop your shoulders?
Yeah, look, initially it does take a little bit of effort to remember to do that. I do recommend some of my clients put a little reminder in their phone so the little beep alarm comes off maybe 3 or 4 times during the day. Driving is a really great one to just get into the practice of actually dropping your shoulders, because often we're quite stressed, especially if you're a type of person that gets road rage, gets annoyed with people going slow or cutting in front of you. So, I guess the thing is, when we do the retreat, we go a lot more deeper into that and how to actually work with stored energy or suppressed emotions that have been stuck in the body and how to release that energy. We do anger management. We work a lot with relationships and triggers in relationships. So when you asked me before, which I didn't answer the question entirely, is some of the challenges, the big challenges that men are facing is the relationship breakdown is one of the main ones. Overthinking, that anger, getting triggered into anger, perhaps getting frustrated with the kids, just repeating patterns that without even thinking. All of these types of things are the main challenges that our clients experience when they're coming on retreat or for a one-on-one session.
I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. There's one roadblock in your business that, when identified and fixed, a whole bunch of other frustrating problems will disappear at the same time. So much time, effort and money is thrown at problems in an attempt to fix them that often doesn't fix the problem and just leads to more frustration. And if this cycle continues, it increases stress and just makes running your own business an unenjoyable pain in the ass. And it doesn't have to be that way. Being a business owner can give you more time and financial freedom, and it can be super rewarding if you do it right. The key is to find your unique roadblock, which you're often too close to the action to see yourself. How do I know this? I've been working in peak performance and business coaching for over 3 decades, and with builders specifically for over 10 years, and I see it every day. So I encourage you to take the Builder's Success Scorecard right now. The link to take the scorecard is in the description. It's free. It'll take you about 90 seconds and you'll have some quality feedback in your inbox before you know it. There was a technique, and it may be something that you suggest as well. And the very first time I heard it was back in, the early 90s, listening to Tony Robbins. And then eventually I learned NLP myself and learned about pattern interrupts and what have you. But we had an interesting conversation in a group of men with my health coach. So I have a health coach, and small groups meet, and talk about their progress. And all 3 of the other guys were sort of saying, I don't really have, anything to get stressed about. And we were sort of digging a little bit deeper and something that you said triggered, this must be so common that people are in a state of stress so often and so long each day, it becomes the norm and they don't consider it stress. It's like when they're at peak, when they're red, that's stressed. But this constant chronic stress that they're living in all day, every day, seems to be their normal state, and they call that no stress. But I guess, and I'm assuming this is what will happen in your retreats and so forth, is that they will actually experience what it's like to be not stressed. And it's probably a very unusual new experience for the guys. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of them, we've just become accustomed to being unhappy. But when you ask them, like, when was the last time that you really felt happy? Like, your heart was singing, you're excited. A lot of these men, like, they can't remember. So, it's just become normal to feel uncomfortable. I guess one of the biggest challenges for me is exactly what you just said. Men say I'm okay all the time, and they've been saying that for many, many years, even if they're not.
Yeah.
So what I want to, a lot of men come to us because perhaps a family member has said, I can see that you're struggling, and then maybe this is an option for you. And that's where we want to come in and be a different option available to men.
Yeah. Yeah, because, as I experience, I'm not the best business coach for everyone. Some people get on really well with me and some people don't. It's just the way it is. You got to find an environment and a process that works for you. So that's really important. And I noticed that on your website there are various options, I guess. One you already talked about and like to learn a little bit more about is the retreats. But you also have a thing called a monthly adventure, and you have an 8-week program as well. What's the difference between those 3 different experiences for men?
Yeah, so I mean, pretty much most of the work that I do has the same content. It's just delivered differently. So the 8-week program is 8 one-on-one sessions.
Okay.
And that's a combination of actually going a little bit deeper and healing. So, if a lot of men, and I will say this, I think it's 1 in 6 men have experienced childhood abuse before the age of 16, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, or sexual abuse. And I think people are not really aware of that. So there's some really big issues that are hiding underneath the surface there. So when we do the 8-week program, we go a little bit deeper into that. And again, it's non-confrontational. It's very quick. We do need to identify that the trauma is there, but then we can clear that. And then I teach them those skills to be able to continue to release those stresses when they come up. So that's the 8-week program. So that's one-on-one sessions. The retreat is where I'm really teaching you as a group to do that, and the content is tailored individually and as a group. So there's generally a theme. The last retreat, there was lots of relationship stuff. So in the type of retreat, we will be looking at, communication and relationship, respect, having boundaries, how to be heard and seen. And I guess we'd talk a little bit about the love languages, how everybody can give themselves self-love and also give and receive love in relationships. So there's a lot of big conversations that we do have. Again, we don't go into story. It's more about here we are now. We all know what the problems are, but how do we move forward?
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the monthly adventure in a second, but you just mentioned the different love languages, and we one of our black belt members, one of our members of what we call the Purpose Hub, which is kind of our advanced black belt member group, I guess, did a session with our group about the love languages, and he's a big burly guy, works mainly in the mines, building and commercial stuff in Western Australia. And he's talking about these love languages, not just about himself and his personal relationships, but how that affected his business, like understanding what his apprentices or his tradespeople or the people in the office, what their individual love languages were and how it transformed his business. Like it was profound. So it might be worth just briefly unpacking what they are and the profound difference and impact it can have when you understand them.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 5 love languages. There's time, spending time with people, gifts, acts of service, touch, access, and positive words and affirmations.
Yeah.
So what that means is that pretty much we have 1 or 2 primary love languages, and we're all human. So we're always driven to feel safe and to feel loved. So if your love language is time and you're with someone who's is positive words, you might wanting to be giving them time all the time. You might want to give them time as a way of expressing love, but what they really need is positive words. So, for example, say I meet someone and my love language is time and there's this positive words, they might be saying to me all the time, "You're doing a great job. That's awesome." And I'm not receiving that as love. I'm like, "Yeah, thanks. Thank you." and they might be an introvert and not want to spend enough time with me. So
Yeah.
it's not long into the relationship before both people start to feel unloved if they're not getting their love language.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect of that is if your love language is positive words, then you need to give positive words to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to give yourself your own love language and give the other person their love language. And that doesn't come naturally. It's kind of like, oh, what? I didn't realize that positive word means that you love to you. So, for example, if your love language is positive words and you hear a criticism, you don't hear the criticism, you hear that person doesn't love you. And that's pretty serious, especially in a work environment when you're like, hey, mate, you didn't do that right. And they hear, oh, wow, and it can be really detrimental then.
Yeah. I expect also that the challenge is because like we're all driven and we all have the need to be or have to be supported by our particular love language, but we don't think about it. Like no one, unless you've done the work, thinks about this. We just being pushed around by it. I guess we just feel the emotions because we're not getting what we need, and I expect that people tend to go if their love language is time, for instance. They don't know that consciously, but they spend time with people that they care about. They would expect that everybody else's love language is exactly the same as theirs. And that's where some of the challenges would show up. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, often it's always that. Like once you start understanding the love languages, you realize why perhaps your partner's upset. By the end of the week, you're starting to feel unloved in the relationship. And I guess we can go all the way back to identifying how to give love through movies and maybe get 5 chances of getting it right. And it's a bit hit and miss. It is really helpful to know what your partner love language is, because when we get upset or we get triggered, that's actually what we need to come back and feel safe.
Mm. Yeah. And I'm assuming, there's a reasonably simple way to find out what it is for you. By reading the book or whatever what's the best way, do you think?
Yeah, it's actually even more simpler than that. People will tell you
go.
their love language if you ask them. If you actually ask somebody, what do you actually need to feel loved? They will probably tell you, because subconsciously we already know what that is. And they often tell you when they don't get it. So you'll hear people say that person doesn't spend any time with me, or they're always criticizing me.
Yep.
It's really easy to kind of understand, if you think about people in your life, what they actually say.
Yeah, perfect. So tell me about the monthly adventure. That's one thing that we haven't unpacked. What similar sort of content,
so
but it must have a different form.
Adventure, that's actually not happening at the moment.
Okay.
We're up in Cairns, but it is something that we do want to get up and running and out there. So the monthly adventure is, I guess, another takeoff to like a men's circle or a men's shed where they actually go out and do something physical.
Cool.
We did do them initially when I started. I was living in Nelson Bay, and we did do them there where they went rock climbing, and then after the rock climbing they would kind of sit around and it's a little bit, it's not as in depth of the other work that we do. It's really just about that connection. And they did boxing, maybe an ice bath and things like that. So that's something that I really do want to get up and running and expanding, just so there's consistency of men getting together as well.
Yeah, perfect. And you mentioned that the retreat was just a few weeks ago. How often do they come around? When's the next one?
Yeah, so the next one's on the 8th to the 10th of February, and that's up in Far North Queensland. At the moment, they're approximately every 3 months, but we would like to expand and do them in the other states as well once they get off the ground. I'd really, really love men to be going on retreats as something that's just normal and part of their life. Women have been going on retreats for years and doing self-care and looking after themselves in this way, and it's really quite normal for women to do this, and it really should be something that is available for men. To just go away, spend that time on the weekend, do some personal development and just grow, on all different levels. So, that's where we want it to be. It's a normal thing, and hopefully we could do them monthly and in different states as well.
Yeah, and I feel that this sort of thing is taking traction. There is a lot more conversations about it. There's a lot more opportunities for guys to get involved in retreat style activities and experiences. So it's very definitely heading in the right direction. So best way to start this journey, to reach out and have a conversation with you, or what's the best way to do this for somebody listening to the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Just go straight to our website, alchemyofmen.com.au. There's lots of different options you can choose, or you can just find my number there and give me a call. I'm happy to have a chat and talk to you about where you're at and what would be the best path forward for you. And if that's not what we're doing, then I can refer you on to other things as well. There's men sheds, men groups. Like you said, there's lots of things popping up, and it's really just more important that, you know, we're having the conversation, men are listening, going, yeah, it's not that scary, and maybe I'll just give it a go. Yeah,
that's right. And it's not that scary, but love your work. It was fantastic to meet you. Thank you very much for putting the time aside to be on the podcast. And, you know, I really hope that this impacts people and gets them to stop and think, because there is a simple pathway to start to get into some prevention, you know, before it's too late. And there are some pretty horrible statistics out there about suicide and relationship breakups and all that sort of stuff. That doesn't have to be as intense as it is, but if we can get people to take action, that would be the best thing. So thanks for being on the podcast. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mick. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. So, folks, that's it for this episode of the ToolShed podcast. I really do encourage you to take some action. Reach out. We'll be putting the website link in the description. All you need to do is click it and reach out, have that conversation, and see whether the Alchemy of Men is going to be able to help you where you are. And I do encourage you to take these sorts of actions, because the statistics of anxiety and suicide, all of those terrible things, and just general mental health doesn't have to be as awful as it is. There are many things we can do to fix it, but we've got to take action. So please do that. That's it for this podcast. We'll be back with another podcast before you know it. I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. That is all. I'm out. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the ToolShed. If this podcast struck a chord with you, make sure you spread the word by sharing it with your mates in the building industry. We love your help to make the building industry better for everyone involved.